All right. You know, this OBS technology is great when it works.
Yeah, so are my employees.
All right, let's see. We got Zoom meeting. Okay, that's good. Webcam frame. Zoom meeting capture. Okay. All right, now I've got the Zoom in the OBS, but I don't yet have the visual in the OBS. So let me just think about how to do that. Snap camera, that's good. Maybe once I start video recording, that'll work. I don't know. Let's see. Share, I've got that going on. Want to keep that happening. Want to keep that happening. Remote control should be auto. Well, says that I'm recording, so I'm going to go with that. But yet I don't see it on my OBS. So everyone bear with me here. Now I'm getting some kind of pencil. Let's see. All right, I'm going to just assume that this is happening here. So I'm going to record and stream. All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Again, launching or attempting to launch my a daily Zoom chat. You know, I'm really ham-handed. If anyone who knows me knows, with the technical aspects of that. So I believe that at least I'm getting audio both on the OBS system and in the Zoom. So if that's what I'm going to be doing, then that's good. Let's see. I'm just still clicking around here. And trying to make something happen. All right, I'm going to run with it as is, and just hope that this is what's happening. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me this afternoon. John Klyczek's here. He is an author and commentator, and we also have Michael D. Shaw is here. He is an author and a writer for health publications. Gentlemen, can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, well, at least we have a sound. We'll put it up as a as an audio as opposed to a video if we don't get any visuals. We're still obviously in the middle of the pandemic, reaching sort of hopefully the end of it. In my state of Massachusetts, there's we have somewhat, I think, of a more liberal governor, liberal in the sense that he's conservative and he's a Republican. In terms of you know, the total control elements of this, he seems to be opening the state up in phases as of today. The Globe reports that he will be allowing places of worship to function normally, which is obviously good. And, you know, there's going to be, in a sense, a gradual reopening here, unlike some other states like New York and Pennsylvania. Now, Michael, I want you to comment on the story coming out of New York and Pennsylvania, where you had these two liberal Democratic governors put in a policy last March that requires by mandate that the states, if someone is released from the hospital with a testing, having tested positive and being positive for the COVID-19 virus, that they be automatically sent to nursing homes. the result, of course, has been predictable. The most vulnerable people in this country in terms of catching this virus are in nursing homes, and thousands of them have caught it and died. What do you make of this?
Well, it was incandescently stupid. Uh, Anybody that knows anything about nursing homes would immediately realize that there's nothing worse that you could possibly do. Because the reason there's so much infection in nursing home is that the people are packed in like sardines because it's more efficient. So I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what advice they got, but perhaps, Charles, even the worst situation is that given this horribly stupid decision, Cuomo is still being touted as the exemplar of how to handle the pandemic.
Why did they do this? I mean, this is anyone with a half a piece of common sense. It's like, putting a person with the virus in a nursing home. And in the case of Pennsylvania, the head of the Department of Health, this Levine, she obviously had foreknowledge that this was a bad idea because she took her 95-year-old mother out of a nursing home before the thing was implemented. So this isn't like, putting aside the absolute insanity of this, they obviously knew it was bad. In that case, anyways.
Well, again, the thing that's even worse is the fact that there's a complete media shutdown on what can only politely be described as mass murder.
Yes, I agree. And I think that yeah, and I just had on the air a Republican candidate for Congress in Pennsylvania, that being Kathy Barnett, and she's driving this thing like you wouldn't believe. And I think that it's hopefully going to be an issue that Republicans understand and will use in a big, big way, because this is, I mean, to me, this is like an atrocity. I mean, these are thousands of dead that would have been unnecessary. I mean, meanwhile, the rest of us who might, the 90%, 98% likelihood that we would, if we caught the thing, it would be a mild case, are being shut down. So, the whole backwardness of this is just unbelievable.
Well, and no argument. And it just gets worse and worse. Of course, the other thing is the lockdown, and I'd be interested to see what Jake thinks about that, but there are numerous papers out, as you know, demonstrating that the whole lockdown thing was a grotesque mistake. There's a paper, it was actually just publicized in the Telegraph London, that the model that was used to predict 2.2 million deaths in the US and whatever it was, 800,000 in the UK. He calls it, let's see, what does it say here? The worst, most devastating software mistake of all time.
Well, so, looking at this thing as a conventional person, I don't understand the medicine. It seems to me that it's not a bad idea to distance oneself during any kind of a pandemic that's contagious. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, maybe that did reduce the spread. I mean, in a way, I mean, it is a contagious disease. And I think that in the case of this particular coronavirus, it's more contagious than the average flu, in that it can spread just by like particles that, in your breath.
Well, right. But the difference is that in most cases, apparently, of infection, the people are asymptomatic, which is really not the case for the flu. There's very few people that catch the flu that don't get the typical symptoms.
But yet, can't they also spread it?
Well, of course they could spread it. So you naturally try to keep your distance from infected people, as you would with someone's infected with anything. But this idea that you're going to quarantine the healthy and shut down the economy based on some overblown NIH guy that's long past his prime, if he ever had one, by the way, based on models done by the guy that already screwed up the mad cow disease model. I think what it demonstrates here is that it's a triumph of credentialism. Apparently, if you're the guy, you're the guy. And it doesn't matter what you do. So what they should have done is none of this. But now we have to try to come back from it. So you have people who want to immediately open up, and then the other side of the spectrum, you have people actually saying that they don't want to open up until there's a vaccine.
Oh, well, that's craziness. Originally we were told that we wouldn't open up until after the plateau had been reached and it was going down. And the states that aren't opening up, I think are pretty much uniformly liberal democratic states. John Klyczek, you're an author. You've studied education and in a sense, the phenomena of education going online and some of the ways that can be manipulated by the establishment. What is your latest research in terms of that, in terms of like homeschooling and on education? All right, I'm not hearing John. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, John,
I
great.
accidentally touched. I'm sorry. I'm clunky too. I guess can you hear me now?
All right, there you are.
Sounds like a
So,
variety.
Now?
Yeah, you sound good. Please continue.
Sorry, I hit the mute on my earbud. I realized when I was
You're worse
shuffling.
than
I'm
I
sorry.
am.
My latest research,
Yeah.
at least is good. How about that?
All right, there we go.
Ties in with New York is one of the places. So my book is called School World Order, and basically I'm looking at it. There's two parts to it. You could look at the corporatization, privatization of education, and then the way big tech works into that, changing academics to workforce training. And there's basically three categories of technology that they're planning on using that will all aggregate into a social credit system. Some of them are already implemented a little bit. Some of them are getting accelerated right now due to the pandemic. Others are going to be down the pipe. And so the three main types of technologies are the adaptive learning software, which conditions the cognitive behavioral part of learning. So basically the thinking part, the social emotional learning, which is going to condition the emotional part. Okay. And then there's precision ed, which is going to look at your DNA, and then it's going to aggregate all three of those things together and give you what they call personalized or tailored individualized lessons based on an aggregate of that, all those biometrics that would go into this social credit system. So right now, there's a couple big moves that are sort of, capitalizing on the lockdown. The first is the new federal regulations for distance learning and innovation. The particular regulations I'm referring to are 85 FR 18638. And there's three main components to it. Basically, it's opening up and deregulating funding for the adaptive learning software, which is automated stuff. And then it uses these other clauses, something called competency-based education, which is where the students no longer work towards academic mastery, but for minimal competence for a particular job. And that also means that you can also you can pace yourself. And so because everybody's stuck inside and everybody's stuck online and being forced to use this, most schools are going asynchronous, meaning not live. You don't go into a Zoom meeting and talk to people live. You just set up these modules and the students take their time at it. So, what that's facilitating, though, is the need for, because we can't be, I teach as well. I teach community college. We can't be available 24/7. And if it's asynchronous, maybe the students are night owls. They're wanting to contact you at 2, 3 in the morning when you're trying to sleep. So the adaptive learning software is going to automate immediate instant feedback to sort of bridge that gap. So 85 FR 18638 is basically deregulating all that. There's even a clause in there that basically says, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't have the quote in front of me, but if you want to read the quote, I did, there's 2 articles I recently wrote. One is COVID-19 distance learning rules help big tech shut down brick and mortar public schools, replace human teachers. And the other one is COVID-19 CARES Act bankrolls post-human AI, and their quotes are in both of them. But it basically says that since AI evolves, the algorithms progress faster than we can regulate legislatively and at the Department of Ed, we're going to get out of the way, and we're not going to punish anybody if you implement new algorithms through the adaptive learning software without our prior approval. Okay, and so the CARES Act, in the meantime, is going to dump a bunch of money into this. Right now it's up to 300 million, and then there's 2 other extra competitions where you can get more CARES Act money. One of them is called the Rethinking K-12 Education Models. The other one's called Reimagining Workforce Preparation. This ties in going with Cuomo, as we getting back to my original point there, which is now that I've given you the context, Cuomo is setting up something called he wants to build back better. Okay, and so he's going to set up this thing called Reimagine Education with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's a Naomi Klein does a nice article. I don't agree with her take on the how to handle the contact tracing, but she's got a good perspective on the education part as far as what she calls the Screen New Deal. And basically, it's everything that I just referred to. Google's Eric Schmidt will sit on the chair of it, and if you want to see what Bill Gates has in mind on top of what I just said, on my website schoolworldorder.info, I have 66 Gates Foundation grants over the past several years that show he's funded every different aspect of this leviathan of ed tech. So that's pretty much how they're using it right now.
Well, I mean, it sounds ominous. I think that their ability to control what happens online is going to be more difficult than their ability to control what happens in the classroom. So I take some solace in that, and I think enough people like you and others are aware of this agenda to try to regulate and crack down on free education online, or the freedom of expression online. I think that also there are a lot of alternative education modalities coming up online that are available to people who know where to look for them. And a lot of what we're talking about here, it's a matter of getting the information out properly and to the right people. And that's not easy, especially in these times when Google is censoring and other stations by use of algorithm and other methods. They're basically blackballing people who don't goose step to the establishment. So that's problematic.
Yeah, one of the things, so I actually managed to get myself on one of the CARES Act committees at one of the community colleges I teach at. I was an adjunct representative. And so, I mean, they're not letting us back in there until the end of the year. So, what I've been trying to, explain or trying to persuade the other committee members is, instead of going asynchronous adaptive learning software, let's go synchronous, like just Zoom, basically a classroom through a Zoom meeting where the students have to meet live and, typical discussion. The only difference is, instead of we're all in the room together, it's through a video. And then that way, and they think that it's going to be easier for the students to manage their time if you just let them pace themselves. But, there's a lot of data that shows, and from my own anecdotal experience talking to students and knowing parents of other students, that a lot of students don't have the ability to, organize all these different classes and prioritize their day. So, having them log in and go to an actual virtual classroom, would be something that, yes, could be good, could actually be good for education, could open up, more real school choice, not this corporate stuff. But at the same time, that would be the best route, if we could do synchronous online until we can get back in the classroom.
Michael, I heard I think I saw an article recently which suggests that and in fact, you've also talked about this, that the lockdown is actually weakening people in terms of our immune system, and that the longer we are not exposed to other people in the course of a day, the more we're going to be weakened as the fall season comes along, and as the virus very well may come back, so it's going to actually contribute to a further spread of the virus. And you know, the more normal and natural condition for people is to be out shaking hands with people and rubbing shoulders and getting various mild germs that you build up an immunity to for your whole life. And
Well, that's exactly how it works.
yeah,
That's correct. And in fact, a leading epidemiologist, you were talking about censorship online. He had a video, well, there's two cases. He had a video of over 1 million views that was taken down because he took issue with this whole lockdown business.
mm-hmm.
And you're probably familiar with the one out of Bakersfield, California.
Oh yeah, the two
where
doctors.
These doctors made the same point, that the way you build up immunity is not to put yourself in a bubble. But this is, it's very sad what's coming out. You can see the petty tyrants that have been created, the ridiculous censorship of information practiced, especially by Google. I mean, if you want to get your feelings hurt, put in a controversial subject and you won't see the results you want on Google. Go to another search engine and suddenly they'll be there. So the whole thing is pretty deplorable. And it's contrary to any reasonable notion of healthcare.
And so here we are with this sort of backward situation where healthy people are continuing to shelter, sick people are continuing to be exposed, and to question this, I mean, can cause a very strong reaction in people, as I may have noticed. I mean, you know, that people don't like to have, you know, they accept this as gospel. I mean, this approach.
Well, they would probably accept it less as gospel if there wasn't this huge political divide in the first place. But there you are.
Yeah, and there are some positive signs in terms of the Wisconsin Supreme Court threw out these laws. Now, that doesn't mean that people are going to start, you know, running around and exposing themselves. Everybody can exercise common sense. You know, nobody wants to catch this flu. It's not a pleasant thing, and it is dangerous. So, you know, I would suggest that this has more to do with the overreaching mandates by governments, and that those governments pretty much on the state level do seem to be liberal democratic governments that want to extend the thing as long as possible. I think in the case of Oregon, for example, they're extending it already till the end of July. And then they're going to revisit it. I mean, they probably want to run the clock right down to the election. I don't know.
Suddenly on November 3rd, everything's going to be okay.
That's what Eric Trump recently said.
But you know the old expression, scratch a liberal, reveal a Nazi. And I think that's come through any number of times.
Well, I mean, to think about how diabolical this is, that they would actually damage the economy, hurt people. You know, people could go hungry. You know, people who are trying to, you know, going to lose their businesses, their stores, their restaurants, you know, their local companies. You know, they're going to end up becoming destitute. I mean, opportunities. Even I watched 60 Minutes last night. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. You know, I'm not a big fan of the Federal Reserve, but they are there, and I'm glad that he's there because he actually made some sense on that. He's like, the biggest worry in this whole thing is that young people particularly, but everyone, is going to have their careers interrupted, and they're going to get off the track of building their careers and building their education. Everyone, it's going to be like it's a huge derailment that could affect our society for a generation if they keep this up.
Well, absolutely. Of course, everyone is talking about the economic devastation. Few people are talking about other aspects of healthcare. All right. There's been specific examples of people that got, let's say, stents put in just before all this started.
Right.
And the stent was only supposed to be left in for 2 weeks and then removed. But that's not essential.
Oh, that's terrible.
So there are people that have infections developed from that. I mean, every aspect of this was foolish. Every single decision was wrong. And where's the media examining any of this.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That'll happen. Maybe historians are going to look back.
Yeah.
But right now, they're busy trying to stop Trump and trying to overthrow the will of the American people. And that's, they're putting everything aside, including the mental condition of their nominee, and his corrupt background, all that stuff under the rug. And, let's move forward and try to beat Trump. I think that's the overriding goal right now.
Well, to put this in perspective, you remember Woodstock, 500, 600,000 people on a farm, certainly not practicing social distancing. But somehow there have been very few pundits that have reminded us that that was right during the Hong Kong flu epidemic. Nobody cared. No one even raised that point.
Wasn't even in the papers. I mean, I remember vaguely hearing about Hong Kong flu, but it wasn't seen as this, the idea of sheltering was unthinkable.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a cultural change. I mean, back then it just shows where the country was culturally back in the 60s versus now. I don't know. What do you think? John?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of pandemics. Actually, there's others that were, there was, I think 57 or 58, there was a big flu pandemic. Yeah, I mean, so there's actually multiple examples where, the way that we've reacted now is contradictory or not in line with the way we've acted at other times, and so, yeah.
Although I keep hearing about this, the two cities during the Spanish flu, which was in, I think, 1918, one of which sheltered everyone and one of which didn't. And the one that sheltered everyone did better. And that their economy boomed, and the one that did not do well. I haven't seen that. I've only heard reference to it. I don't know. I mean, do you have any information on that, Michael?
Well, you have to remember that back then, you're really comparing apples and oranges. Healthcare was, let's put it in perspective, healthcare was essentially non-existent compared to what we have now. It wasn't until after World War II that people forget this, that you went to a hospital for anything other than dying. There was no possibility, unless it was a minor, broken arm or something like this. Generally speaking, there were never good outcomes. So to compare what happened 100 plus years ago to now, why don't we get more recent? John mentioned the Asian flu, 1957 to 58, okay? Put this in perspective. There were over 100,000 deaths of that against a population in 1957 of 172 million. Do the math. Again, no one cared. We went to school. We were told there's an Asian flu, and that was that. And even during polio, when people were scared to death about this every summer, the most they ever did was occasionally shut down state fairs, but it was all voluntary. There was nothing even remotely approaching this nonsense, and this is going to go down as just a colossal, stupid mistake. And then the way historians are going to write it, because they're all liberal, is how come Trump didn't stop the insanity?
Well, they're trying to rewrite that now, of course, and this is the election season. And yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. And it's a controversy to talk about with a lot of people because we're all wrapped up in it right now. And I think people are emotional about it, and there's a defensiveness about it on the part of people who agree with the policy. So it's the kind of discussion that maybe is going to have to be had after the fact. I saw something about the possibility that the whole thing is going to evaporate anyway, probably by June or mid-June once the weather gets hot. What say you? Do you have anything on that, Michael or John?
Well, traditionally, that's what happens with these things. They don't completely go away, but
right.
The thing has already flattened out. And by the way, and John can comment, we have no idea what the actual mortality rate is. in the United States because of the way they've been dinking the reporting of this. I mean, the famous joke was they have some news guy in Florida saying Joe Blow was eaten by an alligator and died of coronavirus.
Mm. On the other hand, I think that they're downplaying the mortality rates in nursing homes in New York State. So, I mean, I guess that you can have politics enters into this thing depending upon which politics we're talking about.
That's right.
Well, the testing is, I mean, so there's several ways that we know for a fact the numbers are not totally accurate. The first one is, confirmed cases. Does that mean that you actually took a test? Because actually it doesn't, because I know several people that said that I got it when they had like a sniffle, and I'd seen them when they had this sniffle. And then they're like, I said, what do you mean you got it? Did you get a test? No. Did you go and get a diagnosis? Like, did he look at you and say, oh, I think you got it because you got a sniffle? Because even that's not confirmed. But it's worse than that. They did telehealth. So you called somebody and told them your symptoms, and then they confirmed that your sniffle or your cough was, so that's one. Okay, we know that some of the tests were contaminated. We also know that the difference between dying with and dying from, and CDC actually has a chart that separates these numbers. And one would be you're dying from the actual acute respiratory failure. The other is you had other comorbidities that took over, and so you didn't die from the respiratory failure, but they mark it as such. Another way that the numbers are fudged is, and this is a fact, that they pay more money for Medicaid patients if you have COVID-19 versus something else. So, I mean, there's a monetary incentive there.
Oh,
and there was a doctor that was just on, he was on an ABC report. I was just looking at him today. I wish I could remember his name. But it was an ABC News report where he basically said the same thing. And when they put the ABC News report on YouTube, YouTube took it down. So it wasn't even his own podcast. So, there's lots of doctors that say this too. I'm a teacher, but I've been looking at the numbers pretty regularly because I come on these public forums and speak, and I imagine this is going to happen. I'll have to speak. And yes, so at the very least, yes, those numbers are not accurate. And even if they were, it would still be an overreaction with the inflated numbers. Yeah.
We're still talking about 0.1% of the population. I recently, Michael, interviewed Dr. Elizabeth Lee-Vlett. Thank you for recommending her.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she came on the show.
Yeah, she's the real deal.
She is, and she's got a clinic in Dallas. She's been a doctor for many decades. We talked about hydroxychloroquine and the fact that she's been using that regularly for her patients going back decades for various ailments. I think it's lupus and rheumatoid arthritis.
That's correct.
And that there has never been a problem with it, and that there's enormous evidence that it not only does it help you get over the COVID-19 virus, but it's being used as a preventative in several countries, including Germany, and Brazil, and I think Costa Rica, and a couple of other countries where they're giving this 10-day dose, a very minor dose, a low dose of this drug, as a way to prevent the disease. And yet in this country, it's practically banned. What is that all about?
It's all political. Yeah. And if that weren't bad enough, you remember when Tony Fauci was touting remdesivir. But you don't hear him tout it anymore. Because what happened was, first of all, it doesn't work that well. Second of all, it's an IV drug. And what he did, on the one clinical trial, he broke the double blind under the guise that, well, this drug is so great that we're just going to have all the placebo people now get this drug. That's not why he broke it. He broke it because the side effects were devastating. People were dying on it. And by breaking the double blind, the results are suppressed.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. This is a scandal, and it's not to mention the fact that that hydroxychloroquine costs about $20, whereas the remdesivir was $5,000. So there's the money element to it as well. I mean, the drug companies and they're not going to make much money off of hydroxychloroquine. It's been around forever and it's cheap.
And it's also was touted by Trump. So God forbid.
Oh yeah, of course. It must be bad, right? Orange man good, must be bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, and it's highly political. And I think I actually think, if we could just talk politics for a minute, I think it's going to backfire on them in that I think that Trump is going to win a big election in November. And I think the Republicans are going to take back the House, and it's going to be a red landslide.
From your lips to God's ears.
No, it should be beautiful if that happens. But I do think that, I mean, they're going to try to prop up Biden. You know, they'll like, it's like Humpty Dumpty. I don't know. They're going to give him like a shot of adrenaline and send him out. And it's just not going to fly. And I just think that a lot of the things we're talking about, the nursing homes, you know, getting COVID-19 patients, the prolonged lockdowns, I do think that's going to come back to haunt them. I think people, you can feel the anger out there, even among liberals, even though they're not conscious of it.
Well, that's probably true.
John, let my listeners and viewers know where they can get your book, where they can learn more about you, and then I'll go to you, Michael.
Sure.
So you can go to my website, schoolworldorder.info, and there's links to Trying Day Press. That's where you can get my book. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all the online distributors. And then if you want to just keep up with I write on several publications. You can access them all through my website, and there's my Twitter. You can get that on my website too. It's at Dallas Professor. I sprinkle my research out in little bits as I take my time writing longer pieces. So that's where you can find me. Twitter and schoolworldorder.info.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, John. And Michael, you're a writer with who writes medical articles. Where can people find your work?
Okay, most of the stuff is on healthnewsdigest.com. I've got over 700 articles. I mean, they're not all up on that site anymore, but they're up on my own site. But there's quite a bit up there on COVID and things of current interest. healthnewsdigest.com.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining me this afternoon. Sorry about the technical problems. I'm getting better. So as I continue forging forward, we will continue to develop the show. Charles Moscowitz, have a great day, everybody. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay,
all right.
you.
Thank you.
I don't even know how to get out of this now. All I see is your whole, everything, your whole screen is my whole computer right now. I can see your desktop and everything right now.
I get it. I'm having all kinds of technical issues right now. But
I'm trying
whatever.
to figure out just how do I box out. I don't even know. Oh, here it goes. I think I found it. All right. Thanks. Hey, thanks a bunch, Charles.
All right.
We'll
talk
talk
to you
again.
soon. All right. Thank you.
Yep.